Several years ago, I lived with my ex-boyfriend in a two-bedroom house that we were slowly turning into our own cozy space. We converted the back bedroom into an office because the only bathroom in the house was accessible through that room. It was an awkward setup, especially when friends crashed on our couch. We didn't want them passing through our personal space to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. We had been living there for about a month when an unsettling event occurred. My ex was out for the night, socializing with his colleagues, leaving me alone in the house. It was a quiet evening, and I settled into my usual routine, watching TV and enjoying some takeout. Occasionally, I would hear faint noises that caught my attention, but whenever I tried to pinpoint them, they would abruptly stop. As the night wore on, I decided to spend some time on the computer upstairs before heading to bed. Back then, our phone line wasn't yet connected, and I was using a pay-as-you-go phone that had run out of credit, which meant I was completely cut off from contacting anyone. I was in the back bedroom, dimly lit by a small table lamp that cast soft shadows on the walls. As I typed away on my laptop, I heard the strange noises again, this time, a faint rattling. It was so subtle that I had to focus hard to determine whether it was real or just my imagination. I paused the music playing on my laptop to listen more intently. I cautiously walked to our bedroom and looked out the front door, but the street outside was empty. I then checked the view from the back bedroom window, but the darkness obscured my vision. Our small yard, enclosed by a high brick wall and a solid wooden gate, was pitch black, and there seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary. I returned to my laptop, trying to shake off the unease. But about 10 minutes later, I heard a new sound, a faint, eerie screeching, almost as if someone was deliberately trying to be quiet. My anxiety spiked. I went to our bedroom and grabbed a heavy iron rod we had found in the back of the closet. I kept all the lights off, fearing that if there was an intruder, they might see my movements and know my location. With my heart racing, I returned to the office bedroom, closed the door quietly, locked it, and wedged a chair under the handle for added security. For about 20 minutes, there was silence. I started to feel a bit foolish, thinking I might have overreacted. Maybe it was just the anxiety of being alone for the first time in the house. But I didn't turn the music back on, and that proved to be a wise decision. Soon, I started hearing whispers, two male voices speaking in hushed tones. They didn't seem to be inside the house. Instead, they sounded as though they were just outside the slightly open window of the office bedroom. I slipped into the bathroom, hoping to get a better look into the alley behind the house. The bathroom extended farther than the back bedroom, creating an L shape around the yard. I climbed onto the window ledge and carefully opened the bathroom window to peer outside. I couldn't see much, but the whispering grew louder, coming from right behind our gate. I couldn't make out full sentences, but I caught snippets that made my blood run cold. These men seemed to know we had recently moved in and were eyeing our valuables, guitars, computers, my DSLR camera, and our TV. It dawned on me that they probably knew I was alone and were waiting for the right moment to break in. Frozen in fear, I stayed by the window, gripping the iron rod tightly. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed up from below. The men had given up on being quiet and were now forcefully trying to break down the gate. I watched in horror as the gate shook violently with each hit. I could only imagine how strong they were. Being a small woman, I felt utterly helpless. I frantically scanned the room, thinking of a hiding place. Then, a bright light suddenly flooded the yard, momentarily blinding me. I panicked and ducked down, thinking the men had a flashlight. But then I heard barking and shouting. When I peeked out again, I realized that the house across the alley had turned on a floodlight. I heard grumbling, cursing, and then the sound of footsteps running away. I stayed locked in the back bedroom until my ex-boyfriend stumbled in around 4 a.m. I didn't sleep a wink that night. In the morning, I went into the yard and found the gate hanging precariously by a single hinge. The back of the gate was scratched around the keyhole, as if someone had tried to force it open. If the neighbors hadn't turned on their light, I shudder to think what might have happened. This incident happened more than 20 years ago, but I remember every detail vividly. Not long after that, my son was born prematurely at 32 weeks. We were lucky because he didn't face many complications, and we were able to bring him home a month later, though he still needed oxygen and caffeine to regulate his heartbeat. That's when things started getting strange. Our cat, who used to frequent my son's room before he was born, suddenly refused to enter. Our dog would sit at the bottom of the stairs, his head cocked to the side, as if listening to something we couldn't hear. Occasionally, while I was changing my son's diaper, I would speak, thinking my husband had entered the room, only to turn around and realize I was alone. A friend had given my son a peekaboo big bird toy that would say, "Peekaboo," when its eyes were covered and uncovered. It started going off by itself, even after I stashed it in a box in the closet. I constantly felt like there was someone else in the house. My parents had gifted us a baby monitor called AngelCare, which we placed under the crib mattress. It was designed to sound an alarm if it detected no movement for a certain period, a precaution because our son was so tiny, weighing just 5 pounds when he came home. Often, the alarm would go off, waking me up in a panic. I would rush into his room to turn it off and check on him, but he was always fine. I convinced myself the alarm was just reacting to his small size, causing the sensor to miss his subtle breathing movements. During this time, I began having vivid dreams about a woman in my son's room. I never saw her clearly, just a shadowy figure with long hair reaching into his crib. One night, I was asleep when I suddenly woke up to someone shaking me roughly by the shoulder, near the door. Startled, I looked over at my husband, asking him why he was shaking me, only to realize he was sound asleep on the opposite side of the bed. I jumped up and sprinted to my son's room, flipping on the light switch, something I'd never done before. As the room flooded with light, I heard a gasp coming from the crib. Sometimes, when babies stop breathing, a sudden jolt or light can startle them back into breathing. I genuinely believe my son had stopped breathing, and turning on the light saved his life. After that night, the peculiar occurrences gradually ceased. The strange dreams stopped, the pets behaved normally again, and the big bird toy never activated by itself. I believe that something, or someone, had accompanied my son home from the hospital to watch over him. A protective presence, perhaps a young woman, ensuring he was safe until he no longer needed the oxygen and caffeine. Even now, thinking back on those events gives me chills. I'll always be grateful for her watching over my son and shaking me awake that night so I could startle him back into breathing. I didn't realize how serious the situation was until I got older. Years later, when I was around 9 years old, my mom left me and my brother home alone one afternoon. My brother was about 12 at the time. We were used to being on our own for short periods, so it didn't seem like a big deal. My brother was in the living room, engrossed in his Xbox 360 game, and I was sitting nearby, watching him play. The house was quiet except for the occasional sounds of the game. Suddenly, there was a loud bang from upstairs, like something heavy had fallen. We froze, exchanging a look of surprise and fear. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," my brother replied, setting down his controller. "Stay here. I'll go check it out." I watched as he cautiously climbed the stairs, each step creaking under his weight. A minute passed, then two. My anxiety grew with every passing second. Just as I was about to call out to him, he came back down, looking pale. "I didn't see anything," he said, sounding unconvinced. "Maybe it was just something in the attic." I nodded, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. We decided to go back to our routine, but a strange tension hung in the air. About half an hour later, my brother suggested we go for a walk to shake off the nerves. I agreed, and we decided to explore the old swinging bridge not too far from our neighborhood. The bridge was about 400 feet long and hung 60 feet above a river. It was a rickety structure, swaying gently with each step we took. Only pedestrians were allowed on it, no running or biking. We had crossed it many times before, but today it felt different, as if the bridge itself was holding its breath. As we reached the middle of the bridge, we heard someone shouting. We looked over to the car bridge parallel to ours and saw a woman waving her arms frantically. She was calling out names, but neither name was ours. Or not them. My brother shouted back, thinking that would clear things up. But the woman didn't move or seem to acknowledge us. She just kept staring with a look of intense concern on her face. We tried to ignore her and continued walking. But then she started sprinting across the car bridge, moving in the same direction we were headed. We exchanged nervous glances. Something about her urgency felt off, but we laughed it off as we reached the other side and wandered towards the train tracks. We knew it was dangerous, but it was a popular crossing point for those daring enough to follow the trail. We had just started filming a video near the tracks when we heard that familiar voice again. It was the woman, but now she was on a hill in the neighborhood across the tracks, still shouting the same names. This time, she began running toward us, her face contorted with fear or anger, we couldn't tell which. Now truly frightened, my friend and I grabbed our belongings and bolted back to the swinging bridge. We were halfway across when we saw her reach the start of the bridge. She stopped there, still yelling, but her tone had shifted. It was angrier, more desperate. I turned around to see how close she was, and I noticed she was holding something behind her back. We kept running, not daring to look back again until we reached the other side. When we did, we saw the woman standing at the end of the bridge, still holding something in her hands. My friend took out his phone and started recording her. The moment she noticed, she abruptly turned around and walked away. We never found out why she chased us or what she had been holding. I couldn't stop thinking about it for weeks. I wondered if she had needed help, or if she had other intentions. It was a mystery that still haunts me. About a week later, another incident unsettled me. It was late in the evening, and my brother and I were living in an apartment we had been renting together. It was February, and the rent was due by the 5th. We didn't want to risk being late, so we decided to go to the bank and withdraw the money. The winter air was crisp, biting at our faces as we walked back home. The neighborhood felt strangely deserted, an unusual emptiness that made me feel uneasy. We made it back to our apartment, and I left shortly after to pay the rent at the rental office. As I walked back, I glanced across the street and noticed a tall, skinny man loitering near the entrance to an alley. His pants hung low, and he had a hood pulled up, obscuring most of his face. The moment our eyes met, I felt a chill run down my spine. His gaze was intense, unwavering. I looked away quickly and quickened my pace, hoping to reach the safety of our apartment. But as I hurried along, I could sense him moving. He was following me, his footsteps echoing mine. I glanced back and saw him pick up his pace. Panic surged through me. I sprinted the last few yards to our building, fumbling with my keys at the door. I could hear his footsteps getting closer and closer, almost in rhythm with my heartbeat. Just as I managed to unlock the door and slip inside, I heard a heavy thud behind me. I slammed the door shut, locking it quickly. I looked through the peephole and saw the man standing there, his expression blank but his eyes filled with an unsettling intensity. He stood there for a moment, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the alley. Shaken, I rushed up to our apartment, where my brother was waiting. I told him what had happened, and he immediately called the police. They patrolled the area but didn't find anyone matching the description I gave. For days afterward, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak, every shadow seemed to hold a threat. These experiences, along with what happened years ago with my son, have made me realize how fragile our sense of security can be. The unknown woman on the bridge, the man outside our apartment, they both had a profound impact on me. Sometimes I wonder if they were connected in some way, part of a larger pattern of events that I still can't fully understand. But I'm always grateful for the moments that woke me up, both literally and figuratively, to the hidden dangers around us. That's all from me, and see you in the next video.